Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Rohan Biju, and today we're going to take a look at the Samsung Odyssey Neo G8 gaming monitor. So we've taken a look at a lot of Samsung Odyssey monitors from the G3, G40B, the G5, and the G7. So now let's take a look at the Neo G8. So the Neo G8 is jam-packed with features of 4K display, 240Hz refresh rate, 1 millisecond response time, and so much more for a steep price tag of $1,500. But there is a deal going on right now, so you can get this monitor for $1,000, which is a significant decrease of price, but is still a lot for a lot of people. So use this video to decide if you really want this monitor or just stick for a more budget option that feels more to your interests. So in this video, we're going to cover a variety of things of this monitor. First, we're going to do an unboxing. Next, we're going to show you how to set it up as a whole. Then we're going to talk about the physical specs and then the display specs. And then finally, I'm going to give you my thoughts, the pros and cons, and my final verdict and score for the Samsung Odyssey Neo G8. So before we begin, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already to watch more future content like this. Like this video if you found this helpful, and comment any questions and concerns, and I'll try my best to answer them. So without further ado, welcome to Techno Review. Alright, so the first stop is going to be unboxing. So you get the standard beige Samsung monitor box, and let's pop it open. The first item we see is a full plastic base. Then we have the neck of the monitor, which has a decent heft to it, but it's made entirely out of plastic. Then we have the infinity core ring, which the names makes it sound really important, but is just an extra piece of plastic to cover up the screws on the back of the monitor. Then we have a 100 by 100 VESA bracket if you want to mount the Neo G8 to an arm. Then you find a white plastic cover to cover up the ports on the back of the monitor. And then finally we have a bag of goodies, which has the power brick with the wire. Then you have a display port cable, which you can use with your PC for a full experience of 4K at 240Hz. Then we have a USB-A to USB Type-B cable, and finally we have all the paperwork. Now let's take the monitor out of the box and take a look at it. The monitor is quite weighty, and you can immediately notice the 1000R curve. Let's place the monitor down and remove all the plastic wrapping, which took me a solid 2 minutes. The design of the monitor looks really sleek, and it's already growing on me. Let's place this back down and start setting up the monitor. First, we take the neck and the base and start screwing them together until they feel really sturdy. Then let's take the neck and place it on the designated spot on the back, and make sure to line up the screws into its designated place and screw them tightly in. Finally, let's take the infinity core ring, split it apart, place it back together in the spot to cover the screws. Then we finally push down and twist, and it should be firmly in place. Now you can bring the monitor upright, and you should be all set to start gaming. And it's also worth noting what I'm going to use to test this monitor. So for the console aspects of things, I'm going to use a PS5 to get a 4K and 120Hz experience. And to test the PC aspect, I'm using a fresh PC with an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4060, and it has a 13th gen Intel Core i7 13700F. So that was pretty much it for the unboxing and the setup. So now let's talk about the physical specs. The design of the monitor is very sleek and would complement any desk setup. The back is white, glossy, and has a futuristic design, and has a signature Samsung Odyssey look. And also it does feel a little bit like an Alienware monitor with the design overall. On the other hand, the front is all black and can blend in with any desk setup, and it's really versatile. The 32-inch screen is coated with a matte finish to reduce reflection, and it does its job really well in my use cases. Under the Samsung logo on the front, you can find the button controls. They opted for a button layout where you have the center, the right, left, up, down, which seems kind of unintuitive. You could use a joystick instead, and for the amount of money we're paying for this monitor, I feel like that would have been a more premium choice. But since we already have it, it's not that hard to get used to, but it's kind of disappointing. It's also worth mentioning that the Neo G8 has a Kensington lock on the bottom right on the back for added security. The monitor is made quite literally entirely out of plastic and feels sort of premium, but I would have preferred a more metal build for something that lands at $1,500. There are so many monitors out there that start at $500 or $600 that offer a metal body and are quite sturdy. The monitor is very wobbly and doesn't feel stable at all with a given stand. It feels like the stand you would find on an Odyssey G3 or a G40B, but it's more acceptable to have it on those monitors because they're more in the budget range, but this really doesn't have an excuse to be this poor in terms of having a good base and stability as a whole. And you're going to notice this immediately. So when you start using the menu system and start pressing the buttons on the bottom of the Samsung logo, it's going to shake the entirety of the monitor, and it just doesn't feel like a very premium experience for the price you are getting. And if you are purchasing this monitor and really care about stability, then I would just opt in for just a monitor arm for just that added layer of security and stability instead of having the base that's given with the monitor. The infinity core lighting on the back and front of the monitor is quite non-existent. It feels more like a gimmick or an afterthought than a decent RGB lighting. The light is barely noticeable and it's not bright enough to light up the wall behind the monitor. It would have been cool if they actually improved on this, because they have this feature in the menu system where it detects what's on screen and displays colors accordingly on the front and back of the monitor to give, a more immersive display. But right now it's more of like a wasted feature. Awesome, so now let's talk about connectivity options. The Neo G8 has two HDMI 2.1 ports, one DisplayPort 1.4 input, two USB-A ports, one USB-B upstream port, one 3.5mm audio out port, and the power port. Also, if you're liking the video so far, a sub to the channel would be amazing. Also, it's worth noting that there is a wire management system, and it's more of a silicon tab that ties all the wires in. Before the price, this does seem to underserve. I feel like they could have done something a bit better with the wire management, but this still works at the end of the day. The ergonomics of the Neo G8 are pretty decent. The Neo G8 has a height adjustment of 4.7 inches or 12 centimeters. It tilts between -12.5 degrees and 7.5 degrees. The swivel range spans from -15 degrees to 15 degrees. It's compatible with a VESA mount that's 100 by 100 millimeter. The best part about the ergonomics of this monitor is that you can rotate this monitor to a portrait view in both directions. This means that you can have your ports facing either direction, which just makes your life easier as a whole. Awesome, so that's pretty much it for the physical specs. So now let's talk about display specs. The monitor packs an insane punch with a 4K display at 32 inches using mini LED lit VA panel technology with almost 1,200 local dimming zones at an aspect ratio of 16:9. One of the main things you will notice about the display is obviously the 1000R curve. During use, I felt completely immersed and the gameplay was stunning. I would say this monitor is not for competitive gamers given its overall 32 inches size and curvature. I mean, the curvature does help with faster paced shooter games, but with a large size of 32 inches, I feel like esports players can opt for a smaller and more flat display at 1080p to get higher refresh rates. On paper, the monitor has a 1 millisecond response time, but realistically, it's going to be around 2.6 milliseconds. So to achieve the best response time, you're going to have to turn off the adaptive sync for some reason, because if you turn on adaptive sync in the menu, it just removes that option and you really get a poor response time. The Neo G8 doesn't suffer from ghosting at all, which is quite surprising for a V8 panel. There is a bit of inverse ghosting, but it's totally acceptable and doesn't really hinder your gaming experience. The monitor has variable refresh rate, and for that it has FreeSync Premium Pro, and this works with G-Sync as well. The best part about this is that you're getting both VRR as well as HDR at one combination, so you have a really great gaming experience. Awesome, so now let's talk about the general picture quality. The black levels look really good for a V8 panel and almost reach levels that seem similar to an OLED. The same thing applies for the contrast ratio, but there's also a catch. Since scenes are going to be realistically dark, it's going to be a huge disadvantage during competitive gameplay, but you can play around with the black equalizer levels, which adjust the gamma for better visibility of opponents in dark areas of the game. There is a bit of blooming in general for this monitor, but it's not as noticeable in gameplay and will not hinder your overall experience. Basically, the black levels and the contrast ratio basically carry this monitor, and the colors too. The colors are very vibrant right out of the box, and it was totally acceptable to me, so I didn't really have to do any tuning to have the best experience. And if you are just purchasing this monitor, you can quite literally use it out of the box for a really great gaming experience. The native contrast ratio is 3600 to 1, and the contrast ratio with local dimming is around 22,000 to 1. Talking about brightness, Samsung really sells this monitor of having 2000 nits of brightness with a 1,000,000 to 1 contrast ratio with HDR 2000. And since I have no way of testing that, since I don't really have the equipment to test if the contrast ratio and the brightness are to that level, what I can say is it's not as bright as you think it is. It's decently bright out of the box, but there are some instances where the brightness suddenly drops because you either turn adaptive sync. For some reason, it just turns off and makes it much darker. So whites really don't look like whites. Instead, they look more of a grayish tone, which is kind of weird. So if you are going to have a really good experience, probably turn off adaptive sync to get, a much more quality-wise, a better experience. But in my experience, the brightness was sufficient right out of the box on both standard and HDR. In particular, HDR highlights are extremely bright without sacrificing the dark areas of the screen, which is really amazing and is definitely one of the highlights of the Neo G8. The colors are extremely vibrant in games and really sell the visual quality of it. If you're buying this monitor primarily for enjoying the graphics of a game, this is definitely one of the best choices with the 1000-hour curve, which complements your immersion in that game. And this also applies for movies, TV shows. If you're like watching it on here, you're gonna be really immersed with the just 1000-hour curve and just the picture quality as a whole. Also, there are some cool features to note about the Neo G8. There's a picture-in-picture mode on this monitor, and there's an ultra-wide mode, which changes the aspect ratio of the monitor to 21:9, which is pretty neat. There's also built-in crosshairs and other settings you should expect standard on every gaming monitor. So if you are a console gamer, you get 4K at 120 Hz, so that's the max most new gen consoles go to. The PS5's max is basically 4K at 120 Hz for this monitor, and on your PC you're gonna get 4K at 240 Hz. And the best part about this is that the ports don't limit these options, so you can get the full range of what you need with the given ports in this monitor, and it's really great that you can do that. One of the main issues with this monitor is scan lines. So if you are unfamiliar with scan lines, it's basically just visible horizontal lines that differ in color. To be fair, you can only see scan lines if you bump up the refresh rate to 240 Hz, but if you keep the refresh rate around 120 Hz, you shouldn't have an issue. But since you're buying this monitor probably for the 240 Hz and the great visuals, that seems like a bit of a tip off. Also, this issue is not too severe because during gameplay or just regular usage, it's totally fine. But if you were to land on a static loading screen or just any image, it's quite noticeable. And this is especially noticeable for blues for some reason. The viewing angles for this monitor are not that great. With the addition of the matte coating and the 1000-hour curve, images will not be crisp at all, and if someone decides to sit next to you to see you play, this is not a very good monitor for that. And this monitor primarily focused on just solo playing, so if you want to get immersed in gameplay for yourself, this is probably the best monitor for that. This also wouldn't really work in a double monitor setup because it's really hard to do that with the 1000-hour curve and just having displays around. But you could actually just use this display as a vertical, which would be really good for your desk setup, but there are different ways you can use this. But in the end, this is more of just like a solo use monitor for your immersion, for your own gameplay. Okay, so I'm gonna touch a bit on productivity with this monitor. So if you're usually getting a monitor, you're gonna also start working on it if you decide to do so. So this monitor is decent for productivity, so you can use Google Docs, text clarity is amazing. You have really wide real estate on the screen for multitasking. You can do triple multitasking, so you can have 3 different things open and just be able to easily use it around because of this large 32-inch screen. But I personally just don't like using curved monitors for my everyday productivity. I use a lot of Excel and Google Sheets, and just Sheets overall feels really weird on a curved monitor. So in the end, if you were gonna use this for your productivity, it's an acceptable monitor, but I wouldn't be something where you would use this every day or buy specifically for productivity. If you wanna watch movies on here, be my guest, 4K display, amazing, but productivity and actual work, I don't think this is the best option. Awesome, so now let's move on to my final thoughts and my final verdict for this monitor. So I'm gonna be really nitpicky because the price of this monitor is $1,500 to about $1,000 since I got it at $1,000 for a deal. So a lot of people are gonna find this as like an upper range monitor. I'm gonna be a bit more nitpicky on what it really offers. The build of the monitor is beyond subpar and is overall a downside for the monitor as a whole. But in reality, you're only going to be purchasing this monitor for a 4K display at 240 Hz. And if that's the case, this monitor really hits it out of the park with great black levels, great contrast ratio, decent brightness that is really good out of the box. Also, color is great out of the box. Everything is vibrant and is really great on both console as well as PC. And I'm going to weigh the physical aspect not as heavily as much as display aspect because you're primarily, if you are purchasing this monitor, for the specific display at 4K curved 32 inches 240 Hz. So the final score I would give this monitor is a 92 out of 100. It does its job as a display really well, does offer some things that aren't very good for the price, but overall is a very good buy. So as always, I've left links in the description if you want to go purchase this monitor. So if you found this video helpful, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already to watch more future content like this. Like this video if you found this insightful, and comment any questions or concerns about this monitor and I'll try my best to answer them. So thank you guys for watching. Catch you in the next one. Peace.